Hi, this is John Farrow with the Farrow Law Firm. Today we're going to be talking about whether you should worry about your family paying an inheritance tax when you pass away. But first, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We put out new videos every Tuesday and Friday, and make sure that you hit the like button because every like helps. All right, again, John Farrow with the Farrow Law Firm. Tell you a little bit about myself. I am the author of Estate Planning for the Modern Family, and I've also recently been voted one of the top 3 lawyers here in Cobb County, along with the law firm being voted one of the top 3 law firms here in Cobb County, Georgia. Now today, we're going to be talking about whether you should worry about your family having to pay an inheritance tax when you pass away. So the inheritance tax is a little bit different from an estate tax. I have put out a video on what an estate tax is and whether you should worry about paying it when you pass away. This video is going to be about whether you should worry about your family paying an inheritance tax when you pass away. So the estate tax is levied on your estate once you pass away. But you'll want to check that video because there are exemptions to the federal estate tax, and Georgia, in fact, doesn't have an estate tax. So let's talk a little bit about the inheritance tax. Currently, there are only about 6 states in America that have an inheritance tax. In other words, all of the other states, other than those 6, do not impose a tax on people who receive an inheritance once a person passes away. Well, in Georgia does not impose an inheritance tax. So you shouldn't really worry all that much about your family having to pay an inheritance tax once you pass away. So let's talk a little bit about the differences, though, between the estate tax and the inheritance tax. The estate tax is paid by your estate once you've passed away, but the inheritance tax is paid by the recipients of the inheritance. So you can sort of see the differences between the estate tax and the inheritance tax is who pays the tax. First is the estate paying the estate tax, and the inheritance tax is paid by those inheriting the money from a person who has passed away. The other differences between the estate tax and the inheritance tax is that the estate tax is based on the value of the estate, whereas the inheritance tax is based upon the amount that the person is receiving. Well, if the person is receiving the entire estate, for example, if you only have one child and everything is going to them, well, then that's pretty significant. But if you have 3 children and you're just dividing your estate up by 3, well, each person won't pay an inheritance tax on the entire value of the estate. Instead, they would just pay a tax on what they are receiving if they had to pay a tax at all. Again, there are only about 6 states that impose an inheritance tax. Georgia does not happen to be one of those states. Now, just like the estate tax on the inheritance tax, there are exemptions to the inheritance tax for those states that impose it. Some of them include if you're a family member, a close family member, like a spouse or a child, then you may not have to pay an inheritance tax. If the value of the estate is below a certain threshold, they may not have to pay an inheritance tax if the amount that they are receiving is below, a certain threshold also. But all of that is governed by state law, and you'd have to go by the state law in those 6 states. Again, Georgia does not happen to be one of them. There are things that you can do to alleviate the inheritance tax. One of the most popular ways is getting an insurance policy that will pay off once you've passed away, and they can often use those funds to pay for an inheritance tax. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is that although there is a federal estate tax, there is no federal inheritance tax. So you do not have to worry about the inheritance tax on the state level. So to answer the question of whether you should worry about your family paying an inheritance tax, not here in Georgia. Number one, Georgia doesn't impose an inheritance tax, and there is no federal inheritance tax. So you really shouldn't worry about that. Your family having to pay an inheritance tax once you have passed away. All right, so that's all we have to talk about today. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Again, we put out new videos every Tuesday and Friday, and make sure that you hit the like button because every like helps.